Hello and welcome back to Chapter 7. This is Part B, wherein we are going to talk about relative adverbs and we are going to intro participial phrases. Pretty exciting stuff. Let's dive right in with relative adverbs. Relative adverbs are extremely related to the relative clauses we have been studying. Relative adverbs are going to introduce those adjectival clauses. We are very familiar with relative pronouns introducing adjectival clauses, but this time, instead of beginning with a relative pronoun, they are going to begin with a relative adverb. We are very clear that these are adverbs, not pronouns, because they are for sure answering verby questions, okay? Where, when, and why. That's about as adverbial as it gets. What's interesting is that these relative adverbs replace an adverbial structure, right? They're going to play that adverbial role within their clause, but the clause as a whole is adjectival in function because a noun is being modified. A little bit sneaky here, a little bit sneaky. So we're going to use these relative adverbs in very few cases and very specific cases. So the relative adverb where is only going to modify nouns of place. For example, Elvis sightings rarely happen outside Las Vegas, where the king is still a legend. I've bolded the noun of place, Las Vegas. And you'll see the main clause, Elvis sightings rarely happen outside Las Vegas. This is a very straightforward pattern 6 sentence. Las Vegas is a noun. So the clause that's modifying it has to be adjectival. But the wrinkle is that where is, of course, an adverb, a relative adverb here. So it's playing that adverbial role in its own clause, where the king is still a legend. But it's modifying a noun. The clause as a whole is adjectival. Pretty cool stuff. The clause as a whole modifies the noun. Again, the noun of place is really the only type of noun we're going to see when we're dealing with the relative adverb where. Then there's the relative adverb when. You're going to want to be very clear on the difference between something like when the subordinator and when the relative adverb. We know we're dealing with when the relative adverb because we're talking about a noun of time. A noun of time. For example, Sarah will be anxious until next week, that's a noun of time, when the grades of the literature exam will be posted. So week is a noun. In this case, you'll notice the noun is part of an adverbial clause in the main clause. And the noun week is being described and modified by this adjectival clause. The relative adverb when is the thing that connects the clause to the noun it modifies. So when the grades of the lit exam will be posted. Pretty cool. So when, the relative adverb is talking about nouns of place as opposed to the when that is just a subordinator for introducing dependent clauses. Let's talk about my favorite of the relative adverbs, why. And I love this because why as a relative adverb only modifies one specific noun. It only modifies the noun reason. I just think this is amazing. They're like, yes, this is a relative adverb. You need to understand it, but there's only one noun in the world that gets modified by this relative adverb. So the reason why funny voices are effective teaching tools remains unclear. So reason is being modified by why, but why is an adverb in its own clause. The diagram looks like this. One thing that's interesting and that you have to be on the lookout for is that just like with relative pronouns, specifically the relative pronoun that, sometimes relative adverbs are also left out of the sentence and just implied. For example, I could totally say, the reason funny voices are effective teaching tools remains unclear. But there's still that invisible relative adverb. In the diagram here, I've put it in parens. You could put an X there also to indicate the relative adverb, but since it's reason, we know it's why, so I went ahead and used the actual relative adverb. So they can disappear on you. Just be advised, they're sneaky, sneaky, just like those relative pronouns. Okay, let's talk about relative pronouns a bit more. So you'll recall the relative pronoun who. Okay, so I could say something like the girl who is kicking the can. I've got a relative clause introduced by the relative pronoun who, right? And this would be very easy to diagram. But sometimes we leave these things out. When we do that, it can also create an adjectival participial phrase, like so. The girl kicking the can. So instead of saying the girl who is kicking the can, oftentimes I'll just say the girl kicking the can. Here, a girl is clearly being modified by this adjectival participial phrase, and it's going to look something like this. Yes, it has a pattern, right? We have a verb. In this case, we have a direct object, can. We have a subject, girl, right? This adjectival participial phrase is a pattern. It's a sentence pattern. So we have to make sure we nail those patterns when we're dealing with these participial phrases. One thing that's cool is that we can really put a participial phrase that's modifying a noun anywhere in a sentence that the noun phrase could go. For example, I know the girl kicking the can. Here the girl is the direct object. I could say the girl kicking the can seems very pleasant. The subject is the thing being modified by the adjectival participial phrase. I could say I frequently play with the girl kicking the can. Ooh, here the girl is the object of the preposition. And we have the adjectival prepositional phrase coming off of the girl. And finally, I brought the girl kicking the can a new can. Here, the girl is the indirect object. So we're still, regardless of where the noun that's being modified comes in the sentence, we can still modify it with a participial phrase. And as I mentioned, these participial phrases do in fact have clause patterns. So you want to make sure that you are clear on what type of verb you're using. For example, if you have a linking verb, which is going to take a subject complement, that same structure will be reflected in the diagram. In the sentence, did you notice Aaron Rodgers acting so confident? You will see that acting, our linking verb, is reflected in the structure of pattern 4 with the subject complement. And this is really just a relative clause that has been condensed with the who is elided, right? The only difference that we're really seeing here is between the verb phrase and the verb in the clause and the presence or absence of the auxiliary be, right? So these are the same. Don't freak out about them. It's basically the same as a relative clause, just with a few words missing the way that relative clauses like to do. Did you notice Butch acting so cute? He really believes you can master these concepts with practice. So keep up the good work, and we'll talk to you soon.